All right, I think we're going to get started. So again, for those arriving on time, you may be wondering why the title of the presentation doesn't match the title on the agenda. And that's because, to be honest, it was a bit of a secret until this morning. But as you may have heard, Cloudera acquired this morning a company called Gazang. And so we wanted to take this opportunity to present about the future of Hadoop security, because this is a very important topic right now in the evolution of Hadoop. So we wanted to walk you through our vision for Hadoop, and in particular, the new aspects of our portfolio. So let's just dive right in. So as you heard this morning in the keynotes, across industries, the main theme these days is that companies are starting to move Hadoop from pilot to production. But as soon as they do that, they start to run into IT, because IT says, hey, that's great that you've got this new innovative project, but I still have a checklist you need to meet before you can deploy this thing. So in healthcare, we have customers that are synthesizing, credit processing to begin. You've got billions of credit transactions being analyzed to determine automated creditworthiness as well as fraud detection. But as soon as you start to put all that consumer data together, suddenly you need to be able to pass a PCI audit. In healthcare, we have payers and providers correlating electronic health records with new Internet of Things data, connected devices. But HIPAA is always looming over their shoulders. And then in the public sector, well, it's pretty obvious what happens when this information leaks out. Suffice to say, it's not a good thing. So as these companies are all beginning to move from pilot to production, they need to be aware of what IT will require in terms of security and compliance. Now, the challenge that the community faces is that traditional technologies are already set up to meet these mandates. They have all of the multi-factor, multi-layer controls necessary to enable them to pass an audit. Hadoop, on the other hand, while new and exciting technology, has not yet caught up to those traditional systems. And so the common theme that we have heard as a vendor is that Hadoop, we're afraid, will only become another silo, despite the vision of Hadoop as an enterprise data hub may only be fit to be a data lake, someplace where I can put data, but I'm going to have to pump it out before I can do anything useful with it. So our aim is to address this seeming conflict and actually bring these two worlds together so that customers can gain the benefits of Hadoop without the downsides of not being able to pass a compliance audit. So our vision for securing Hadoop is pretty simple. It's three things. We want to enable our customers to innovate, to deliver the benefits of Hadoop without compromise. And we mean compromise in a few different ways. First of all, you shouldn't have to compromise on your vision for delivering analytics because of security. Security should enable you to put more data into the platform, not less. It just means that you should be able to lock it down as appropriate. It also means that you shouldn't have to think about performance when you're enabling security. Security, if you're encrypting, decrypting, compressing, decompressing, all those things are very CPU intensive. And so finding ways to optimize the silicon level to enable you to turn on security end-to-end across the system without having to trade off the performance you'll get from a next-generation Sequan Hadoop platform or a next-generation in-memory platform, like Impala or Spark. It has to be able to meet compliance requirements. We can talk about security all day long. I can say it, I can put it on a slide, but at the end of the day, you're going to be back at your job, and you're going to be faced with an IT auditor, and they're going to say, here's what I need to see. And no matter what I, as a marketer, put on a slide, you're going to have to pass that audit. And so we are focused on ensuring that you will be able to pass that audit and get on to the fun stuff, because that's where you'd rather be. And then finally, providing comprehensive security across the platform. So it's very easy in the Hadoop community to view it as a set of siloed projects where, okay, we're going to lock down Hive, we're going to lock down HDFS, we're going to lock down this and that and the other thing. But that is completely insufficient. You need to lock down the entire platform. Otherwise, you're not going to pass that audit. So if we sort of unpack what it means to be secure and compliant in Hadoop, again, getting past just saying we are providing security for Hadoop, what does it actually mean? What do you need to provide? We can break it down into roughly 4 categories. So you can talk about perimeter security, which is how do I ensure that people can't break in to the cluster. You can talk about access controls, which is once you're accessing the cluster, how do I ensure that you are authorized to access the right data? And then you can talk about visibility, which is once I've granted you that access, how can I ensure that only the right people have access to the right data? So that audit trail and lineage that goes with it. And then finally, where we'll talk about the majority of the content today is in data protection, which is the physical data on disk. How do you ensure that that is protected from prying eyes if they break past all the other security measures? So if we take a look at these one at a time, we can talk about perimeter security. So when people talk about Hadoop security today, chances are they probably actually mean Kerberization, applying Kerberos protections to the cluster. That's sort of the de facto thing people talk about for Hadoop security. And that's great, but Kerberos is kind of complicated to set up. And so while we were one of the first distributions to certify with Kerberos, and also driving that through our partner ecosystem as well, so you don't just have a paper integration, you actually have a deep, secure integration, what we've got on the roadmap for the very next release is automated setup of Kerberos, as well as the ability to integrate that with Active Directory and LDAP. So again, it works with your existing configurations. On the access control side, we believe that Hadoop has to provide centralized access controls across all the query frameworks. You've heard this morning about Hadoop has, I think this is common knowledge, now grown beyond batch to incorporate interactive SQL and search and NoSQL and stream processing and in-memory processing and so on. But would you really want to have separate authorization frameworks for each one of those? Separate authentication frameworks? You wouldn't. You'd want it to be centralized. And so that's why Cloudera, together with Oracle and now with IBM and some other folks in the community, have built a project and donated called Apache Sentry, which provides centralized access permissions or centralized authorizations for Hadoop. And over the coming months, we will be extending those protections to all of the other components in the stack. Visibility. So this was a major issue for a lot of our financial services customers who said, it's great that we can now track who is doing what in the cluster, but I also need to be able to track where the data has gone and where it's come from. So Cloudera Navigator is a new extension product to our platform that enables you to provide a centralized view of who has seen what in the cluster, as well as lineage, which is not a new concept for those of you who have been in data management for a while, but for Hadoop, this is a novel concept. So for any data that lands in HDFS, I get metadata on where it's come from, how it's been transformed, where it's gone to, and this is very important, again, as we'll hear in a little bit, about meeting certain compliance initiatives. And Navigator also will extend in several ways, both to provide more comprehensive lineage and audit, as well as some of the things we'll talk about next. So actually, with that, I'd like to introduce David Tishgart with Gazang and now with Cloudera to take you through the exciting news from today.
Thanks, Matt. Appreciate it. And I suppose I should actually start by thanking you guys out in the audience today. It's really because of you and the innovation and the work that you've done in developing products and solutions on top of Hadoop that have, raised the ire of the security and compliance folks at your respective companies and said, hey, you know what? You can't continue this project unless you've got encryption, unless you've got key management, unless you've got those controls that help this platform meet compliance. We can't go any further. And it's because of that, and because the business is starting to see what you guys are doing, what's possible in Hadoop, that they're saying, you know what, we need this, let's make security happen. And that's really what we're here to talk about today. So real quickly, I want to just go over, for those of you who may not have actually seen what was announced, this is a little bit about our company, but today, the title of this presentation is The Future of Hadoop Security. But what I want to talk to you about for the next few minutes is actually what's available today, right now. When you guys walk out of this room, this is something that is absolutely available to you. It's not something that's going to come in the next 6 months or so. You can have this right now. So what we announced is that Gazang encryption and key management is now part of Cloudera Navigator. So Navigator Encrypt and Navigator Key Trustee are some products that we're going to be talking about over the course of the next few minutes. Real quickly, because we Gazang are new to Hadoop Summit, you may not have heard about us, so let me tell you a little bit about the company. We were founded in 2010, based in Austin, Texas. From the very beginning, our focus was on security for NoSQL and big data stores. We have a maniacal focus on security. It's all we talk about. I can't remember the last time I didn't have a dream that involved data encryption. It's really, really sad. My wife hates me. So the other thing that's important to note is this is not something that we just picked up. We've been doing this for a long time, and we've got over 200 customers that are paying us for this. Many in the Fortune 1000. So this is a solution that's being used by companies like 3M, like MetLife, like AstraZeneca. They're using our key management encryption because it helps them meet compliance. It helps their big data projects move forward in the business. And just as an aside, Merv Adrian was on stage talking this morning, and he's not allowed to really talk about vendors, but I'll go ahead and pump us, for something he did. He named us a cool vendor in big data this year. So just a few months ago, they issued a report saying Gazang is a cool vendor in big data, and we're not a big data company. We just help all of you guys be better at being a big data company. So let me talk a little bit about some of the challenges we hear from our customers. And these are some of the things that, as you're thinking about how security can help you guys, here's some of the things that you can look to Cloudera now to get help with. So I need to meet, insert compliance acronym here. It doesn't really matter. HIPAA, PCI, SOX, FERPA, FIPS, these are some of the things that you probably hear the most when you talk to your compliance and to your security guys. But the point is, when you encrypt data and you ensure that the keys are managed separate from the data, and that's an important point that I'll hit on in a little bit, you are well on your way to meeting compliance. We are not going to stand up here and tell you that that is all you need to do to meet compliance. Any company that tells you that that's the case, it's just not. But it's an important checkbox, and it's one that I'm sure that you've heard that you need to fill. So we can help you encrypt data at rest, and we can help you manage those keys as well. And that's going to get you a good part of the way towards compliance. Real quickly, the reason that we talk about data at rest has a much larger exposure window, and so do the keys. The keys persist for a very long time. In fact, I think it was 66% of PCI breaches last year were against data at rest rather than data in motion. We all know about the Heartbleed bug that was really popular. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about data on disk. So, and just a last slide really on compliance here, what I want you guys to be thinking about, these are some of the questions that you may have been asked before, and if you haven't been asked before and you start talking to somebody in compliance, here are some things that they'll ask you. Are your encryption, is your encryption and key management processes, are they consistent with NIST? Are the keys stored separately? What kind of authentication and access controls are we talking about? Do the crypto modules meet FIPS 140-2 certification? Do you know where all your sensitive data is and if it's under compliance scope? One of the things that we hear a lot about is I need you to encrypt HDFS, or I need you to encrypt HBase. What about all the metadata? That's also, there's tons of sensitive information in log files. All that stuff you really need to be thinking about encrypting, so it's not just the file system. I want security that won't impose a harsh penalty. So Matt talked a little bit about this. What we do is we provide a transparent layer between the application and the file system. It dramatically reduces the impact the impact to CPU on encryption. So one of the things that we've done a number of performance tests on Hadoop, and one of the things that we see is when you've got an optimized environment, and we can help you do that, when you've got the right environment, you're using the right type of encryption, you've got Intel hardware, so you're taking a lot of that utilization, putting it back on the chip. We can get performance impact down into the very low single digits, almost 2%. So if you're actually encrypting data, you almost don't even know that it's happening because the performance impact is just so low right now. We also make sure that only applications that need access to the data can get access to the data, so that that speeds things up because you don't have a ton of applications trying to get to data that they don't actually need. So that's some of the things that we can work with you to do. Centralized management of security artifacts is so important. So if you think about it, and I'm guessing there's not a lot of encryption and key management experts in the crowd right now. Real quickly, encrypting is just basically scrambling data. And then what happens is you get a key, which is like a marker that tells, that whoever has that key can access and retrieve and decrypt that data for use, right? So that's what we're talking about. Every time you encrypt or scramble some bit of data, you get a key. And you can imagine, especially in something like Hadoop, where you've got massive files and lots of data being encrypted, you're getting a lot of keys. And it's not just, like I said, it's not just HDFS keys, but it's Hive Metastore keys, and it maybe you're doing SSH login, so you've got private keys for that. There's all sorts of security objects being spun up, and you'd be surprised at how they're being managed today. I mean, if you don't have a key manager, what companies will do is take all their keys and put them in an Excel spreadsheet, put it on their desktop, and say, don't click on this link, and that's what accounts for security nowadays, and I'm not kidding. There needs to be a better way, and we're bringing that to you. Another analogy I like to use for key management is if you're encrypting and not managing your keys, that's like locking your car and then leaving the key in the driver's side door. It's just not safe, and it's not something that we'd recommend. So we can help you centralize and bring all these authentication objects into a centralized management. And then finally, it's critical that no unauthorized parties can access my data. It's one of the things, and we talk about access controls a lot here. What we're talking about when we talk about access controls is actually access to the encrypted data. So one of the things that's very important for compliance is who can access data based on business need to know. Well, I don't think that database administrators and sudo should be able to just get access to sensitive data that they don't need to do their job. If their job is administrative, they don't need to see my credit card data, for example. So what we're doing is we actually can enforce access based on process. So only certain processes can get access to encrypted data versus a super user, and that's really what we're trying to enforce with our process-based access controls. So what we're talking about again, encryption, key management, process-based access controls available today in Cloudera. I want to just take you real briefly through what this looks like. Very, very simple drawing, but what we do is as applications address the file system, as they're reading and writing to disk, what we do is we insert a transparent encryption layer just beneath the file system and process-based access controls. So it's AES 256 encryption. If anybody knows what that means, that's industry standard encryption. It's really the strongest available out there. And if your keys are properly managed, there's really no way to crack that. The encryption is very high performance. There's we can offload performance onto the Intel chip to go even faster. And we actually do the encryption down at the node. So however large you want to scale up your Hadoop cluster, anytime you add a new node, you can get encryption. Encryption's also, it's available as a Cloudera parcel. So very easy to deploy through using parcels. And then the keys, again, are protected in a separate server called Navigator Key Trustee. In Key Trustee, you can think about it as an opaque object store. So it's a place where you can really put anything. What we want to talk about for security's sake, you really want to put keys in it, but you can put SSL certificates, Kerberos key tab files, passwords, passphrases, tokens. It doesn't really matter. The point is, if you guys think it's important to secure it and control it with policy, that's what you use Key Trustee for. So one of the cool things that you might notice is a bullet on there. It's bullet 3. This is unique trustee and machine-based policies for multi-factor authentication. So imagine you one of the things that you do from time to time is you'll shut down an Apache web server, and then it'll need to spin back up again. There's a schedule for that, right? It happens every Thursday at 3 in the morning. So what happens is that server's going to need to get a key, right? And that key is stored in something like Key Trustee. So what happens is when the server goes down, and it needs to reboot, it's going to need to authenticate, it's going to need to do a key exchange, it's going to need to say, hey, key trustee, can I have that key back? And key trustee is going to send an alert to, it's going to send an alert to 3 or 4 people who are going to say, hey, is this right? Can this server reboot? I just got a request the server needs to be reboot. So what we do is we actually have trustees that say, okay, there are actual people who can authorize and deny the release of a key. So this is actually really unique because what happens is in a typical process, just machines are having this conversation. There's no human element introduced. And that introduces risk because if a machine is compromised, then the whole system can compromised and a key can get out in the open that shouldn't get out in the open. With trustees, humans are introduced. And humans, it's really difficult. You might compromise one, but it's almost impossible to compromise multiple people. So there's sort of an additional authentication layer beyond this machine-to-machine communications. So that's something that's also available, and it's kind of cool. Lastly on this slide is HSM integration. I don't know how many of you are familiar with HSMs. HSM stands for Hardware Security Module, and they are in almost every major corporation. If you are a Fortune 50 company and you care about security, you likely have a hardware security module. These are hardened appliances that do nothing but store keys. So what we can do is we can integrate with those HSMs. So if you want to use the Hadoop encryption, you want to use the Hadoop key management, you can now do that, and your keys can be stored the same way they always have based on the compliance regime that's important to your company. So if your company requires a hardware security module, we can absolutely integrate that. That is really, really important. I can't stress that enough, especially for those of you out there who have heard that term FIPS 140-2. This is what they're talking about. They're talking about integration with HSMs. So another cool feature of this announcement, and this gets more to the future of security, is this Cloudera Center for Security Excellence. This is something that's also available right now. So in Austin, which is where Gazang is headquartered, we are going to be maniacally focused, as we always have been, on comprehensive data security for Hadoop. So today, it's encryption and key management. Tomorrow, we're going to stand up a full certification and security test suite. We're going to be focused on enabling the partner ecosystem for security and really focused on working with the Intel chipset, cloud and virtualization security alignment. All these things are going to be run out of Austin. Project Rhino, you guys might be familiar with some of the work that's going on there around HDFS encryption and some of the security JIRAs associated with Hadoop. We are going to be managing a lot of that work out of the Cloudera Center for Security Excellence. So again, not something we're paying lip service to, and this is not a one-off acquisition that Cloudera is making and saying, okay, guys, we've got security taken care of, let's move on to the next project. Security is absolutely going to be a fundamental thing that Cloudera does going forward. So just a couple of examples. I've talked about compliance, and I sort of mentioned that we do a lot of work with big companies, and here's a couple of examples of Cloudera customers that we've been working with over the years. One thing I didn't mention, I should have earlier, is that we've been a Cloudera partner for a long time, all over 2.5 years, and these are some of the companies we've got in common. There's plenty more, but just two I wanted to share with you. The state of Minnesota, that's the MNsure logo on the right-hand side of the screen. So MNsure is their state health exchange, and you can imagine there's a lot of very sensitive healthcare information about citizens in the state of Minnesota that is being managed in this Hadoop cluster, and so they're using MNsure, or MNsure, is using Cloudera to track interactions between providers and customers, and all of this sensitive detail, to get smarter and learn more about how to provide better service to their customers. It's all secured by Gazang, or now Cloudera. And it meets, to meet HIPAA compliance, and that's one of the things that was important for them too. When they came and talked to us, they said, hey, we've got a really hard, fast-moving requirement. We need to get security stood up in 2 weeks. I think it was the amount of time we had. And we didn't know anything about the project or how big it was when they first called us, but we were able to go in there, get up and running in a couple of weeks, and that speaks to the ease of deployment, the lightweightness of the software, and just how easy it is to deploy across a large cluster. And they loved the fact that once it was in, they could forget about it. It didn't slow them down, and that they knew that it was going to pass a compliance audit. And it did pass a compliance audit very shortly afterwards. So very big success story with the state of Minnesota that we're very proud of. Western Union is another one. Western Union, or fraud detection, you saw this morning that fraud detection was one of the key use cases for Hadoop, and Western Union is absolutely using it for that purpose. There's a lot of PCI data that Western Union has under control, and PCI is actually interesting because PCI, people think about PCI and they think PCI is just, okay, make sure that you mask my credit card number. It's actually a lot more complicated than that. PCI involves 12 steps. Each step has like 7 or 8 sub-steps. And filling out a PCI audit form is next to impossible. It's something that only superhumans can do. But one of the key things in there is key management. It's been written into, the PCI DSS came out with PCI 3.0 this year. And almost 50% of what's new about PCI 3.0 is key management. And, are you doing it right? Where are the keys? Who has access to them? How are they audited? All that stuff, it's all part of the PCI 3.0. Western Union saw this coming, and they knew that they needed a key manager that was going to get them to check as many boxes as they can off the PCI checklist for PCI 3.0. And that's what we did for them. So what we're doing is we're managing not just the credit card data, the PAN number that's on the front and the date and the name on the card, but also all the personal information about the users of that card, because that's really a big part of what PCI is. It's not just the number, but it's also the personal data that then identifies the holder of that card and everything else about their buying habits. So Western Union is using us to encrypt all that data, just as they're using Cloudera to run some of the fraud detection. So again, just to summarize and sort of tie back into the slides that Matt was showing earlier, data protection is a really, really big part of our focus at Cloudera. So in the past, and actually it says previous, but this is still very much holds true today, we are getting a lot of what we do with regard to data security from our partner ecosystem. So there are wonderful partners out there who, ironically enough, used to be our competitors, and now frankly, I can't wait to work with a number of them. So these are companies that are doing data encryption, that are doing tokenization, that are doing masking at a scale that's going to meet the needs of what Cloudera customers want to see. And we're going to work with them to help integrate those technologies better into the Cloudera ecosystem. And for those of you out there in this audience that might have used, or that might be using encryption from another vendor, masking from another vendor, you can absolutely still do that. In fact, we encourage you, continue to do that, and you can still work with, we'll still gladly work with you. We're really excited to continue to build the partner ecosystem for security up. On the roadmap, transparent encryption for HDFS through work with Project Rhino. So that's something that's really important to us. What I talked about today, there's HDFS encryption, but also encryption for other things like Hive Metastore, HBase. We are also bringing open source HDFS to market very soon. That's also on our roadmap. With that, I think I want to hand it back over to Matt.
Thanks, David. So if we summarize it all up again, the recent addition around data protection is just one pillar, all that detail, just one pillar of how we're looking at providing comprehensive security for the ecosystem. And I'm glad that, David, you talked about Project Rhino, because that's actually a huge part of our joint investment with Intel. It's part of their relationship with Cloudera as well, as you may have heard about recently. So 2 different pillars to Project Rhino. So one is the open source work we're doing around HDFS encryption and key management. But the other big component I actually neglected to mention earlier is around the Apache Sentry project. We're actually rolling that in as well into the Rhino banner. So again, other ways that we're collaborating with the community to bring comprehensive security to Hadoop. So I wanted to kind of wrap up. This is the first actual sort of product architecture diagram. And if you were coming to the session hoping for something about an enterprise data hub, here's a picture of it, so we're covered now. We can check that box for the presentation. But really, these diagrams are becoming commonplace, right? Everybody's got one. There's a storage layer, there's a resource management layer with Yarn running in it. That's sort of the standard now, right? You've got multiple ways to access your data, so you can put all your data in one place and then access it in a variety of ways. But the key thing that's been missing from the conversation until now has been, how do we ensure that as the data goes into that one place and gets accessed by a number of users, that it's going to be comprehensively secure and governable? And that's really what we're focused on completing now, so that customers can move from pilot to production with confidence. So in particular, the component that we're adding to the stack with this announcement today is in the data protection space, in particular encryption and key management, not just with the Gazang IP, but also with our partner ecosystem, which, as David mentioned, is still a huge part of how we help customers solve their challenges. And it's interesting. There's been a lot of conversation recently around how Hadoop fits into the ecosystem, about how it's not just about standing up a new environment to solve new problems, but also collaborating with and complementing your existing investments, for example, with data warehouses and other online transactional processing systems and other existing investments. And what we've seen is that unless we solve these problems, the only thing that Hadoop will ever be good for is an ETL tool, just to feed data into those systems, because you couldn't do the analytics in Hadoop otherwise. Yeah, we've got to check off all the SQL compliance boxes. Yes, we have to keep improving performance. And we've got a pretty good lead on that. But none of that will matter at all unless you can check these 5 boxes on security and compliance. So that's where we are simultaneously focused, not just in the additional whiz-bang features and all the new things you can do with the platform, but also in comprehensive security across the entire ecosystem. And the last thing I'll say on that, and I'll just kind of drill this point home on the next slide, is as we're talking about implementing that strategy, about having those 4 pillars of security, there's 3 things you need to keep in mind about that strategy. So one is that it needs to be comprehensive. So not just securing or locking down individual components of the ecosystem, but the entire ecosystem. So providing standards-based authentication. So relying on Kerberos because that is the de facto standard. Let's keep building on that. Let's ensure that every single component of the stack is Kerberized, that all of our partner integrations also support that security. We talked about Apache Sentry for centralized authorization, authorization for enabling you, whether you're accessing the cluster through Hive or Impala or Search or HBase or Spark. You have one set of policies, and it's not just a thin veneer or UI on top of diverse policy management. It's one set of policies through one project. That's the standard in the ecosystem right now, supported by multiple vendors. When we talked about native data protection as a transparent component that you can just implement, and all of a sudden you've achieved that part of compliance. And then finally, end-to-end audit and lineage. So there's a lot of talk, again, in the community about audit and lineage, but it turns out that a lot of those solutions are really point solutions. You need to put all of your data through a particular pipe in order to get audit data or to get lineage metadata. With the Cloudera approach, our goal is to provide comprehensive visibility across the ecosystem, no matter what tool or technology you're using, that all the metadata is at the file system level, so you basically have complete visibility, not just into what's stored, but also how it's accessed. And that's really important. So compliance ready, again, I can't take any credit for this, Cloudera can't, but Gazang has thought deeply about what it takes to pass a compliance audit. And so leveraging their expertise, the new Cloudera Center for Security Excellence, ensures that we can walk you through your compliance audit. If you're about to take your project from pilot to production, we can actually show up and say, here's what you're going to need to check off, and here's how our stack can help you do that. So you don't have to fear the IT audit. You can actually embrace it and say, nope, I've got that all set. Here's my checklist. We're good to go. We've done this before. And then finally, transparency. And this is actually, to me, one of the most exciting things, is that our work with Gazang and Intel, in particular, ensures that you can deploy security comprehensively without paying a tax. So as David mentioned, look, if you're going to turn on access to all of these different applications, to all these different users, you better be locking that thing down, but you don't want to give up the performance that you've gained. So really, this is about having your cake and eating it too. You can get all the performance without any of the performance penalty of encryption and compression that goes with it. So working with Intel to build extensions for Apache Hadoop through the open source community to leverage the chips that are the standard for Hadoop in the data center these days. So again, it's about providing fundamentally new insights while maintaining compliance. And that's really why we think customers are going to be excited about this new portfolio addition to the Cloudera family. So we're running up on time, so there's plenty more to learn about. Again, this is a new announcement. There are plenty of things still to hash out, but as David said, available right now today, you can call up Cloudera and we can deploy a compliant encryption solution into your existing cluster today with negligible performance impact. So that's pretty exciting. And we look forward to talking with our customers and with the partner community about how we can extend this work to our existing joint solutions. So come by the booths. Everybody should be prepared to talk about this and have a conversation. So thank you very much.